Every day, you and I get bombarded with negative news. And just like our bodies becomes what we eat, our minds become the information that we consume. If you want to stay positive, it's so important that you also listen to stories that inspires you and uplifts you. In this podcast, we interview world-leading experts dedicated to solving the world's most pressing problems. And if you stick around, I promise you will not only be as informed as if you watch the news, you will feel uplifted, inspired, and have more positive energy in your life. Welcome to Great.com Talks with. Hi and welcome. Today Great.com talks with Mariano Castro, who is the Latin America legal and policy analyst for TIRN, which stands for the Turtle Island Restoration Network. And if you haven't heard of them before, they are a global ocean nonprofit that is a leading advocate for the ocean and marine wildlife. And their website is seaturtles.org. And if you're new here into this podcast, you definitely want to press subscribe on YouTube or in your podcast app, because today we're going to speak about how we can protect species like sea turtles, whales, salmon, and other marine species from extinction and suffering. So Mariano, thank you so much for taking the time.
Hi, no, thank you very much for your invitation. I'm very happy to be here with you.
That's good to hear. So how would you describe TIRN to someone that is not familiar with your organization?
Well, I say that the best description is that our mission is to mobilize people in local communities around the world. So our organization is based in Northern California, but we also work in Latin America, in Costa Rica, promoting the protection of endangered species and critically ecosystems.
Okay, so you want to mobilize people. So why do you see that as a crucial thing to do? What is the reason people are, not mobilized already, so to say?
So, we currently face many challenges around the world to protect our environment, to protect our nature. And we feel that the best way to actually protect it is by mobilizing and empowering local communities to do that. So we do this through many ways. We do grassroots empowerment, consumer action, strategic litigation, hands-on restoration, environmental education. We promote local and national, international marine sustainable policies, which is the area in which I work for.
Okay. And so how does that work in practice? Maybe we can use the Cocos Galapagos swimway as an example. So are people coming to you with a problem, or do you identify problems and then you seek out people that are affected and try to empower them?
So perhaps let me tell you a bit about this strategy and this initiative, and maybe I can explain more what is it that we do.
Mm-hmm.
So the Cocos Galapagos Swimway, it's a marine corridor. Imagine a marine superhighway that connects two biodiversity hotspots in the Eastern Tropical Pacific, Cocos Island in Costa Rica and the Galapagos Archipelago in Ecuador. So scientists have found out that there's an important connectivity between both sides. And this is research that has been going on for many, many years. And scientists have found that sharks migrate from one hotspot to the other. Sea turtles use the same route to migrate. But as you know, the only protected areas are around Cocos Island specifically and around the Galapagos Marine Reserve specifically. But then we have a large marine area, which is this super highway that connects both, that it's unprotected. So all these species, many of them endangered, they fall to the risk of industrial fishing. So what is it that we do? We have been working with these scientists, and we try to convert all the information, all the research that they have into tangible policies to protect all these marine species.
I can see the challenge then, that the highway can be exploited. But who owns that highway? Like, that should be international water, right? And isn't that like hard to protect then if no one is really responsible? Or
So I feel that this is part of the interesting of this project. So even though I'm a Costa Rican, for many years, we never noticed that we have a marine border with Ecuador. So we were taught in school that our borders were Panama and Nicaragua. But that's because we don't pay enough attention to what happens in the ocean. And we have a huge marine area in Costa Rica, and it happens that we have connecting limits with Ecuador, and that's because of the Galapagos Islands. So Costa Rica and Ecuador, they both share a maritime border. So the whole highway that I'm talking, the Cocos Galapagos Swimway, it's within the economic exclusive zones of both countries.
Okay, so what is the plan then to protect this highway? What is TIRN's approach to help?
So we have been working with our partners because we cannot do this alone. So we work with many partners in the area, Migramar, Pacifico, other organizations, local organizations. Um, and as you mentioned before, this is a very challenging idea because it's protecting a huge area that lies within two different countries. So how we foresee this is that first we need to protect this huge area, and there are several efforts in both countries aiming to increase the protection of Galapagos and of Cocos. But this would be only one of two steps, because the other step is that we need governments to jointly manage and to coordinate for the protection of this binational area. Um, Sometimes it's difficult to imagine this, but we need to think that nature knows no borders.
Yeah.
So if you draw the limits in a marine area for sharks, for dolphins, for whales, they don't know these limits. So we need to think like, what's the best way to protect them? And what we have found out is that drawing these limits by ourselves is not enough. So we need to coordinate on a regional and international way. We need a more holistic approach to be able to protect these species.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I see the scope of the challenge of the problem you're dealing with. It gotta be interesting to advocate for it. So what else is TIRN doing? Because I saw you were also helping other species, or so you're doing research ending plastic. There were some other things you were doing as well.
Yes, so as I mentioned before, we have a very broad approach and we have projects in different places. So in California, we're also working in the restoration of watersheds to protect coho salmon. In the Gulf of Mexico, we're also working with endangered sea turtles, and we have a big plastic uh, prevention program as well. In Latin America, we're doing this work in the Cocos Galapagos Swimway. We're also conducting some research in Cocos Island. So we organized a couple of expeditions per year, which you're very welcome to join us in one of these expeditions. And you can see what an amazing place it is. We're also working to protect very endangered species such as the leatherback sea turtle. So we're supporting local organizations in nesting beaches to protect these animals.
I would really love to go. I can imagine how pretty it is.
Maybe next time I can interview you and you can tell our friends that are listening to this podcast.
That would be awesome.
What an
Our
amazing
founder
podcast.
Eric should definitely pay for a trip for me.
Yes,
But
so good.
so I'm curious then, because you've obviously been involved for a while. What has changed then in the last 10, 20 years for them? Yeah, both how many of these pieces are protected, but also have people's mindsets shifted in the last 10, 20 years?
So I feel that's a very interesting question, and it's because sometimes, especially if you work in conservation, sometimes you lose hope, and you feel that whenever you read a new report and it says that 70% of shark populations are declining all over the world, and you think, what is it that I'm doing? Is it worth it what I'm doing? But then you also realize that people are more aware now than before. And for example, Cocos Island and the Cocos Galapagos Swimway is a great example of this. So in my country, Cocos Island has always been like a very mystique place. It's 300 miles away from the coast. Almost no one can go. It's very remote. And people were not aware that we had such a big maritime area with such wonderful biodiversity in there. But now more and more people are starting to realize that we need to protect this. So countries like Costa Rica were always very successful And we had this image of green champions around the world, right? But we have always said like, okay, but what happened with the blue? We always left it behind. And I feel that every day more and more people are starting to care about this. And this is when you recover hope to keep fighting for the protection of these species and these ecosystems.
Yeah, it really starts in the mindsets. So, what is your vision then? What would you like to see happen in the next 5, 10, 20 years?
So maybe, and to connect this with the previous question, something that is also very relevant is that now you see politicians speaking about this as well.
Yeah.
And you see presidents and ministers and international conventions, and the international community reunites, and they set these targets and global goals, right? These very ambitious goals. For example, Costa Rica is part of the Global Ocean Alliance together with Ecuador. And their target is to protect 30% of the world's oceans. So when you see these, you get very optimistic, but then you also want results. You want
Yeah.
to see that it's great to see, and you feel very proud of it when you see your president talking to the world and speaking about the importance of protecting 30% of the world's oceans. But then you also want to see the results of that. Um, so I guess that's what I foresee for the near future. I want to see all these targets, all these commitments, all this policy become tangible, become a reality.
Yeah, that's the missing link for me as well. And hope it happens sooner rather than later. So I'm in a country far away from you. I'm in Stockholm, Sweden. What do you think that people from Sweden and Europe are not aware of when it comes to the marine species that are endangered in your part of the world?
So I feel that one of the greatest thing about the environmental movement, and perhaps more in the marine area, is that everything is connected. And even though you live far away from us, whatever happens in this part of the world also affects you, and vice versa. Oceans are connected. If we don't protect ocean areas, if we if we deplete all the fishing areas, that's going to affect you. That's going to affect everybody, right? We all share this world. It's very hard to think that what happens on a different latitude is not going to affect me.
Mm. I'm curious about the salmons because I was in Alaska 3, 4 years ago, and I learned about these amazing animals and how they are like returning to the same brook as where they were born and the problems of overfishing. So I might be messing this up because I don't know so deeply about it, but could you tell me a little bit about the salmons and the work that you do and the challenges that they're facing?
So first of all, I have to admit that I'm not an expert on salmon because I work
Good,
on
me
on
neither.
the other part of the project, and I promise that I will figure out more to have better answers. But so what we do in our projects in California is that we restore the watersheds in where these salmons live. So by protecting their habitats, we recover their populations.
Mm. So that is then the places where they were born up in the streams, or is it more like where they are living?
It's where they born. So by protecting all these habitats, what we
Mm.
do is that we protect their populations as well. And
It's so cool when I learned that they're swimming back up the same stream as they were born.
it's amazing, right? And it comes back to what I mentioned before, like everything is connected. That's a
Yeah.
watershed, and they move from one place to the other. So perhaps we need to think on what's better for the animals and just how we think that conservation should look like.
So we talked a lot about now what we should do collectively, but what can an individual that is listening to this, wanting to help the maritime life, but understandably feels a bit powerless because the problem is so big and a human is so small, what can they still do to be part of the solution somehow?
Well, that's one of the greatest things about Turtle Island Restoration Network, and is that we mobilize people, and we mobilize people around the world. So everyone wants to do something. Sometimes you don't know what, sometimes you need inspiration to decide on what to do. But there are many things that even you sitting in Sweden can do to protect marine species. in Costa Rica and in Ecuador. And that can go from signing a petition, from sharing a message. This great podcast, for example, it's an amazing opportunity for us to communicate our message. People listening can follow us on social media. We've got Twitter, Facebook. They can sign to our newsletters. They can learn more about what we do. They can volunteer. Whenever these restrictions, travel restrictions are lifted, they can volunteer, they can come, they can join our expeditions to Cocos, which I invite you again to come, because I promise it's going to be an amazing experience. So there are many things you can do. You can visit our website, seaturtles.org, and you can see what inspires you, what area of our work you feel closer to. And then either join our actions, sign petitions, call our governments. We're trying to get, at least for the Cocos Galapagos swimway, it's a big challenge that we're trying to overcome, and there's a big need to promote political will. So if people from around the world can tell our president, Ecuadorian's president, we need to protect this marine superhighway. There are also other initiatives that are, of course, very important for the protection of this swimway. For example, in Galapagos, there's a big campaign to expand the marine reserve right now. So if people can also join these petitions, this call to the president of Ecuador to act now, that means a lot.
Mm. Yeah, those are some super tangible steps to take, and it was exactly what I was looking for. And unfortunately, we're coming up towards the end of this interview, but Mariano, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with Great today. I very much appreciate it.
No, thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you. And for you listening, if you enjoyed this episode, press subscribe on YouTube or in your podcast app, because that is showing the algorithms that this conversation is important, so more people can hear this podcast and get excited about action they can take to protect our maritime life. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode. What is great.com? That is the most common question that we get. And the shortest answer I can give you is that we are a company that is moving money from the online casino industry and donates it to charities that is helping the environment. The long answer, unfortunately, I don't have time to tell you today. But if you're curious, definitely Google what is great.com to learn more.